The blood-soaked wanted poster fluttered against the dust-caked windowpane of the Naco saloon as Catherine James stepped off the stagecoach into the scorching Arizona heat of 1878. The small frontier town seemed to hold its breath. As her boots touched the dirt, the only sound the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. She adjusted her simple blue traveling dress, lifted her chin, and faced the hateful stares of those who had already decided her fate before she'd spoken a single word. Catherine hadn't expected a welcome party, but the sheer hostility radiating from the townsfolk lining the main street caught her off guard. Women pulled their children close, and men spat in the dirt as she passed. The wanted poster bearing her father's face had traveled faster than the stagecoach that brought her. Now she stood alone, the daughter of the man accused of stealing the town's entire savings during a bank robbery 6 months prior. "You've got nerve showing your face in Naco," growled a burly man with a thick mustache who blocked her path, sheriff's badge glinting in the sunlight. "Jasper James's daughter ain't welcome here." "Sheriff Tanner," Catherine replied, her voice steadier than her hands. "My father is innocent, and I've come to prove it." A ripple of angry murmurs swept through the growing crowd. "Your pa killed 2 good men during that robbery," a woman shouted. "Shot them dead and disappeared with everything we had." "My father never killed anyone," Catherine replied. "And he wasn't even in Arizona when the sheriff took a threatening step toward her." "We don't need your lies, Miss James. Fact is, your father stole this town's future. Folks lost their savings, businesses closed, and good people left. Now you show up, bold as brass." Catherine stood her ground, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She had nowhere else to go. Her father had been framed, and she had the proof, or would have it, once she found the missing ledger. But first, she needed a place to stay, work, and time to investigate. "I understand your anger," she said, "but I'm not my father. I'm here to work and to learn the truth." "Truth is," Sheriff Tanner sneered, "we don't take kindly to the James family. You've got until sundown to get back on that stagecoach." The crowd pressed closer, their faces twisted with anger. Catherine felt a flutter of panic rising in her throat. She had spent her last dollar on the stage ticket to Naco. There was no going back. "Let the lady through," came a deep voice from behind the crowd. The sea of angry faces parted, revealing a tall man leaning against a hitching post. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but Catherine could see the sharp angle of his jaw and the intensity in his blue eyes. Dust covered his worn leather vest and denim trousers, and a Colt revolver hung low on his hip. "Stay out of town business, Wade," the sheriff warned. Wade Zimmerman pushed off from the post and sauntered forward. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable with danger. "Seems to me the business of running innocent women out of town on a stagecoach ain't exactly in your job description, Sheriff." His voice carried across the crowd without him raising it. "She's Jasper James's daughter," someone spat. Wade's gaze never left Catherine's face. "I didn't realize we'd started punishing folks for their kin's crimes in Naco. Thought that's what we left back east." The sheriff's face reddened. "You're not exactly in a position to judge, Zimmerman, not with your own reputation." A ghost of a smile touched Wade's lips. "Maybe that's why I recognize when someone's being unfairly accused." He turned to Catherine. "Miss, this town's full of enemies right now, but you've got one friend worth 100. The crowd murmured uncomfortably. Catherine could see the mix of fear and respect they held for this man. "You vouching for her, Wade?" Sheriff Tanner demanded. "I am." Wade's hand rested casually near his holster. "She stays at Mrs. Porter's boarding house. I'll pay her room and board until she finds work." "She'll find no work here," a shopkeeper called out. "Then she'll work for me," Wade replied evenly. My ranch needs a housekeeper." Sheriff Tanner stepped closer to Wade, lowering his voice. "You're making a mistake." "Wouldn't be my first," Wade said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But running a woman out of town without cause would be yours." For a tense moment, Catherine thought the sheriff might draw his gun. Instead, he turned to the crowd. "Anyone harms Miss James, they answer to me. Anyone helps her, they answer to the town. That clear enough?" The townspeople dispersed slowly, shooting dark glances at both Wade and Catherine. Wade approached her, tipping his hat slightly. "Wade Zimmerman. I own the Double Z Ranch outside town." "Catherine James," she replied, extending her hand. "Thank you for your intervention, Mr. Zimmerman, but I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's a job offer." His eyes assessed her quickly. "Unless you've got some other plan for proving your father's innocence while avoiding getting shot." Catherine stared at him in surprise. "How did you? Why else would you come to a town where everyone hates your family name?" He picked up her small traveling bag. "Come on. We'll get you settled at Mrs. Porter's, then figure out what to do with you." "I can carry my own bag," she protested. Wade smiled for the first time, a genuine smile that transformed his weathered face. "I know you can, Miss James, but just this once let someone help you. Town like this, with enemies everywhere, you'll need your hands free." As they walked down the dusty street, Catherine felt the weight of hostile stares following them. She had expected resistance, but not open hatred. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Zimmerman? You don't know me." Wade's pace didn't slow. "Let's just say I've had some experience with false accusations myself." "Is that why they don't seem to like you much either?" he chuckled. "They like my cattle and my business just fine. Me they tolerate." He glanced down at her. "Your father didn't do it, did he?" Catherine's shoulders straightened. "No, he couldn't have. He was with me in St. Louis when the robbery happened. Someone framed him." Wade nodded. "Then you've got your work cut out for you. Naco folks are stubborn. They've been suffering since that money disappeared." "So have I," Catherine said quietly. "My father died in prison last month, beaten to death by other inmates before his trial could even begin." Wade stopped walking, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. Few people do." The newspapers were more interested in reporting the crimes he supposedly committed than his death. Catherine blinked back tears. "That's why I'm here, to clear his name and find who really robbed this town." Wade studied her face for a long moment. "That's a dangerous goal, Miss James." "It's the only one I have." He nodded once, decisively. "Then let's get you settled. You've got a long fight ahead." Mrs. Porter's boarding house was a 2-story white building at the edge of town. The older woman who answered the door looked suspiciously from Wade to Catherine, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Mrs. Porter," Wade said politely, "this is Miss Catherine James. She needs a room." The gray-haired woman's expression soured further. "James." As in a paying customer," Wade interrupted. "I'll cover a month in advance." Mrs. Porter's eyes narrowed. "My other boarders won't like it." "Your other boarders aren't paying her bill," Wade replied, placing several coins in the woman's palm. "Miss James works for me now. Anyone gives her trouble, they answer to me." Mrs. Porter pocketed the money with a sniff. "Very well, but she'll take her meals in her room. I won't have her upsetting the others at my table." Catherine opened her mouth to object, but Wade's hand on her arm stopped her. "That's fine," he said. "She starts work at my ranch tomorrow. I'll send someone to collect her at dawn." After Mrs. Porter showed Catherine to a small, sparse room at the back of the house, Wade lingered in the doorway. "It's not much," he said, "but it's safe." "Why are you really helping me?" Catherine asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. Wade leaned against the doorframe. 6 months ago, when your father supposedly robbed the bank, I was in town, saw some things that didn't add up." Catherine's heart quickened. "What things? Tomorrow," he said. "We'll talk at the ranch where fewer ears are pressed against doors." He nodded toward the hallway where floorboards had creaked moments before. "Dawn," Catherine confirmed. Wade tipped his hat. "Welcome to Naco, Miss James. Sleep with this." He handed her a small revolver from inside his vest. "And trust no one but me." After he left, Catherine sank onto the thin mattress, the weight of the gun heavy in her hands. She had come seeking justice but found herself in a nest of vipers. If not for Wade Zimmerman's unexpected alliance, she might already be on her way back to St. Louis, her father's name forever stained. She tucked the revolver beneath her pillow and unpacked her few belongings, including a worn photograph of her father and the letter that had arrived just after his death, with the cryptic message that had brought her to Naco. The truth lies in the second ledger. Look to the banker's silver mine. Catherine didn't know what the message meant, but she intended to find out with or without the town's blessing. And despite his timely rescue, she wasn't entirely sure she could trust Wade Zimmerman either. In Catherine's experience, men rarely offered help without expecting something in return. The soft pink light of dawn was just beginning to filter through the thin curtains when Catherine heard the knock at her door. She had been awake for hours, too anxious to sleep more than fitfully. After checking that Wade's revolver was securely tucked in the pocket of her skirt, she opened the door to find a young man with a shock of red hair standing awkwardly in the hallway. "Miss James, I'm Timothy from Double Z Ranch. Mr. Zimmerman sent me to fetch you." Catherine nodded. "I'll be right down." She gathered her few belongings, uncertain whether she would be returning to Mrs. Porter's that night. The boarding house had been uncomfortably silent the previous evening, with no one offering so much as a greeting when she ventured to the washroom at the end of the hall. When she descended the stairs, she found Timothy waiting by a wagon. Mrs. Porter stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her disapproving gaze following Catherine's every move. "Mr. Zimmerman said to tell you we'll be bringing you back this evening," Timothy explained as he helped Catherine into the wagon. "Unless you prefer to stay at the ranch." "This arrangement is fine," Catherine replied, unwilling to put herself further in Wade's debt. The journey to the Double Z took nearly an hour, winding through scrubland that gradually gave way to grassy pastures. Catherine watched with growing interest as the ranch came into view, a sprawling complex of buildings centered around a large two-story house built of timber and stone. It was far more substantial than she had expected, speaking of considerable prosperity. "Mr. Zimmerman's been here 10 years, Timothy explained, noticing her surprise. "Started with nothing but built it into one of the biggest operations in the territory." "Does he have family?" Catherine asked, immediately regretting the personal nature of the question. Timothy shook his head. "No, madam. Just the ranch hands and Mrs. Flores who does the cooking and housekeeping. Though she's getting on in years now, which is why Mr. Zimmerman's been looking for help." Wade was waiting on the porch when they arrived, his tall frame silhouetted against the morning sun. He'd exchanged yesterday's dusty clothes for a clean shirt, though he still wore the gun belt low on his hips. "Miss James," he greeted her, helping her down from the wagon. "I trust you slept well." "As well as could be expected," she replied honestly. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Come inside. Mrs. Flores has breakfast waiting." The interior of the house surprised Catherine even more than its exterior. Though decidedly masculine, it was well appointed with solid furniture, colorful Mexican rugs, and bookshelves filled with volumes that spoke of an educated mind. This was not the home of a simple cattleman. A plump, elderly Mexican woman greeted them in the dining room, laying out plates of eggs, bacon, and fresh biscuits. "Mrs. Flores, this is Miss James," Wade introduced. "She'll be helping you with the housekeeping." Mrs. Flores studied Catherine with shrewd dark eyes, then nodded once. "Welcome, señorita. It will be good to have young hands here." They ate in relative silence, Catherine aware of Wade studying her between bites. Finally, when Mrs. Flores had cleared the plates and left them with coffee, he leaned forward. "Now, Miss James, tell me why you're really in Naco." Catherine set down her cup. "I told you, I'm here to clear my father's name." "And how do you plan to do that?" The evidence against Jasper James was substantial. The stolen money was never recovered and witnesses placed him at the scene. "False witnesses," Catherine said firmly. "My father was with me in St. Louis. We were settling my mother's estate. She had died the month before. There are documents proving his presence there, signed by lawyers and a judge." Wade's eyebrows rose. Yet those documents weren't presented at his hearing. "They were lost en route to the territorial court." Catherine couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. "Someone wanted my father to take the blame." "Why?" "That's what I need to discover." She hesitated, then decided to trust him with part of the truth. "I received a letter after my father's death. It mentioned something about a second ledger and a silver mine belonging to the banker." Wade's expression sharpened. "Hank Milbury's mine. That's interesting." "Why?" "Because Milbury claimed to be ruined after the robbery, said he lost everything. Yet 3 months later he suddenly had enough capital to expand his mining operation. Hired twice the workers, bought new equipment." Catherine leaned forward. "Where did he get the money?" "The story in town is that he had an Eastern investor," Wade replied. "But no one's ever seen this investor." "You think he used the stolen money?" Wade shrugged. "I think it's curious timing, but Milbury is a powerful man in these parts. His brother-in-law is Judge Ellis, who presided over your father's hearing, and his cousin is our esteemed Sheriff Tanner." "A family enterprise," Catherine murmured. "Perhaps." Wade's eyes were steady on hers. "The question is, what do you hope to accomplish? Even if Milbury is involved, proving it won't be easy, and the townspeople have already convicted your father in their minds." "I need to find that second ledger. It must contain the truth about what happened to the money." Catherine took a deep breath. "And I need to access the bank's records." Wade let out a low whistle. "You don't aim small, do you? Breaking into the bank would get you shot on sight." "I'm not planning to break in," Catherine protested. "But there must be a way to see those records legally." "The only people with access are Milbury himself, his clerk Edwin Prescott, and the bank's bookkeeper, Miss Lorraine Wilson." Catherine's mind raced. "Is Miss Wilson from Naco?" "No. She came from back east about a year ago." Wade's lips quirked. "Caused quite a stir. She's educated, independent, and doesn't suffer fools. Half the men in town have tried courting her, all unsuccessful. Could she be persuaded to help? Unlikely. She's completely loyal to the bank." Wade studied Catherine thoughtfully. "What skills do you have, Miss James, besides an admirable determination to clear your father's name?" "I was a teacher in St. Louis," Catherine replied, "and I helped my father with his accounting business. I'm good with numbers." A slow smile spread across Wade's face. "Are you now?" "That might be useful." "How so?" "Milbury's mine operation has grown so quickly that they're struggling to keep up with the payroll and accounting. Last I heard, they were looking for someone with exactly your skills." He raised an eyebrow. "Of course, you'd have to use a different name." "Catherine James wouldn't get past the front door." Catherine considered this. "You mean spy on them?" "I mean give yourself an opportunity to look for your second ledger or any evidence of wrongdoing." Wade leaned back in his chair. "But it's dangerous, if they discover who you really are." "I'll take that risk," Catherine said firmly. Wade nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. "Very well. We'll create a new identity for you, but you'll need to establish yourself in town first. Let people get used to seeing you. Working here gives you that cover." What about the hostility I faced yesterday? It will fade, somewhat. Naco folks have short memories when it comes to newcomers, as long as you keep your head down and do honest work. He smiled grimly. And having my protection counts for something, even if it's not popularity. Why do they dislike you? Catherine couldn't help asking. Timothy said your ranch is one of the most successful in the territory. A shadow crossed Wade's face. That's precisely why. I came here with nothing 10 years ago and built something substantial. Made some enemies along the way, particularly Milbury, who doesn't appreciate competition for land and water rights. He shrugged. And I tend to speak my mind, which isn't always appreciated in a town that runs on secrets and favors. Catherine studied him, sensing there was more to the story but recognizing his reluctance to share it. Well, I'm grateful for your help, however complicated your motivations might be. Wade laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his face. I assure you, Miss James, helping beautiful women oppose corrupt bankers is motivation enough. Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks at his compliment, unexpected and disarming. She quickly changed the subject. What are my duties here at the ranch? For now, you'll help Mrs. Flores with the house. She'll show you what needs doing. He stood. I have business in town today. When I return, we'll discuss the details of your new identity. After Wade left, Catherine spent the morning working alongside Mrs. Flores, cleaning the large house. The older woman was quiet but kind, showing Catherine the routines without unnecessary chatter. Mr. Zimmerman is a good man, Mrs. Flores said suddenly as they folded linens together. Many in town do not see this because they are jealous or afraid. Afraid of what? Catherine asked. Mrs. Flores shrugged. Of a man who cannot be bought or bullied. In a place like Naco, such a man is dangerous to those with power. She fixed Catherine with a penetrating gaze. He risks much to help you, señorita. I didn't ask him to, Catherine said defensively. No, Mrs. Flores smiled. That is why he does it. She patted Catherine's hand. Be careful with his heart. It is stronger than he knows. Before Catherine could respond to this cryptic warning, they heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Mrs. Flores moved to the window. Riders, she said, her expression darkening. Not ranch hands. Catherine joined her at the window and felt her blood run cold. Sheriff Tanner and 3 other men were approaching the house, their expressions grim. Is there somewhere I can hide? Catherine asked urgently. Mrs. Flores shook her head. They will search the house. Better to face them. She straightened her apron. I will be with you. The pounding on the door came moments later. Mrs. Flores answered it, her small frame somehow managing to block the entrance despite the sheriff's attempt to push past her. We're looking for the James woman, Tanner said. Step aside. This is Mr. Zimmerman's property, Mrs. Flores replied calmly. You need his permission to enter. We don't need permission to arrest a suspect, one of the other men growled. Catherine stepped forward. I'm here, Sheriff. What am I suspected of? Tanner's eyes narrowed. New evidence has come to light connecting you to your father's crimes. You're wanted for questioning. What evidence? Catherine demanded. That's for Judge Ellis to discuss with you. Tanner reached for her arm. Come along peacefully now. Catherine took a step back. I'd like to wait for Mr. Zimmerman to return. That's not an option. The sheriff nodded to his men who moved to flank Catherine. Either you come willingly or we take you forcibly. Your choice. Mrs. Flores moved to Catherine's side. I will come with you, señorita. No, Catherine said quietly. Stay here and tell Mr. Zimmerman what happened. She lifted her chin and faced the sheriff. I'll come peacefully but under protest. I've committed no crime. The journey back to town was tense and silent. Catherine sat rigidly on the wagon bench, conscious of the men watching her every move. Her mind raced, trying to understand what evidence they could possibly have fabricated against her. In town, instead of taking her to the jailhouse, they escorted her to the imposing home of Judge Ellis, a stately building that dominated the north end of Naco's Main Street. Catherine was led to a study where the judge and Hank Milbury waited, both men regarding her with undisguised contempt. "Miss James," Judge Ellis said without rising from behind his desk, "thank you for joining us." "I didn't have much choice," Catherine replied, refusing to be intimidated. Milbury circled her like a vulture. He was a tall, thin man with cold eyes and meticulously groomed whiskers. "Do you know why you're here?" The sheriff mentioned evidence, though he was vague on the details. Judge Ellis pushed a document across his desk. "This telegraph arrived from St. Louis this morning. It seems you were not just your father's daughter but his accomplice. The St. Louis authorities believe you helped plan the Naco robbery from afar." Catherine's heart pounded, but she kept her voice steady. "That's absurd. I was settling my mother's estate with my father when the robbery occurred. We were both in St. Louis." "So you claim," Milbury said smoothly. "Yet witnesses place your father here, and this telegraph indicates you were handling suspicious sums of money immediately after the robbery." "I was handling my mother's estate funds," Catherine protested. "There are legal documents. Convenient that these supposed documents are never available for examination," Judge Ellis interrupted. "First they were lost. Now they're presumably in St. Louis where we can't easily verify them." Catherine looked from one man to the other, understanding dawning. "You're framing me just like you framed my father." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Milbury stepped closer. "Careful, Miss James. Such accusations against respected citizens could be considered defamatory." "What do you want from me?" Catherine asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Judge Ellis leaned forward. "Information. Where did your father hide the money?" "He didn't steal any money." $50,000 disappeared that day," Milbury said. "Someone took it." Catherine's mind raced. 50,000 was far more than what had been reported in the newspapers. How would she know that unless? "We're prepared to be lenient," Judge Ellis continued, "if you cooperate, perhaps even allow you to leave Naco without charges." "In exchange for what?" Catherine asked. "Tell us where the money is," Milbury said bluntly. "And sign this confession acknowledging your role in planning the robbery." He pushed a document toward her. Catherine didn't touch it. "I won't sign a false confession." Judge Ellis sighed. "Then I have no choice but to remand you to Sheriff Tanner's custody while we await formal charges from St. Louis." "You can't do this," Catherine said, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "I have rights." "Rights?" Milbury laughed coldly. "You're the daughter of a thief and murderer. In Naco, that means you have exactly the rights we choose to give you." The door to the study burst open. Wade Zimmerman stood in the doorway, his expression thunderous. Behind him, Catherine could see Sheriff Tanner sprawled on the floor of the hallway. "This meeting is over," Wade announced, his hand resting on his holstered gun. Judge Ellis rose slowly. "Zimmerman, you're interfering with a legal proceeding." "There's nothing legal about intimidating an innocent woman." Wade moved to Catherine's side. "Miss James works for me. If you have charges, file them properly. Until then, she remains under my protection." Milbury's face flushed with anger. "You're making a serious mistake." "Not my first," Wade replied evenly, echoing his words from the previous day. "Certainly won't be my last." He turned to Catherine. "Are you ready to leave?" She nodded, relieved beyond words. "This isn't finished," Judge Ellis warned as they moved toward the door. Wade paused. "You're right about that. It's just beginning." He guided Catherine past the sheriff, who was groggily getting to his feet, and out into the street where his horse waited. "Can you ride?" he asked, already helping her up. Yes, Catherine managed, still shaken. Wade swung up behind her, his arms encircling her as he took the reins. Hold tight, he murmured and urged the horse forward. They rode in silence until they were well outside town. Only then did Wade slow the horse to a walk. Are you all right? He asked, his voice gentle near her ear. Catherine nodded, acutely aware of his proximity. How did you know where to find me? Mrs. Flores sent one of the ranch hands immediately. I was already in town. His arms tightened briefly around her. I'm sorry I wasn't there when they came. They said there was a telegraph from St. Louis claiming I helped plan the robbery. Wade's chest rumbled against her back as he made a sound of disgust. There was no telegraph. That was a ploy to pressure you. How can you be sure? Because I was at the telegraph office all morning on ranch business. Nothing came through from St. Louis. He guided the horse off the main trail toward a small stream. They're getting desperate. Your presence in town has them worried. As they stopped by the stream to let the horse drink, Catherine slid from the saddle, her legs unsteady. Wade dismounted beside her, his hands steadying her waist. Why would my being here worry them? She asked. Unless they really are hiding something. Wade's hands lingered at her waist. That's exactly it. Whatever happened 6 months ago, you're a threat to their story. He studied her face. What did they ask you in there? Where the money was hidden. They wanted me to sign a confession. Catherine wrapped her arms around herself. They mentioned $50,000. The newspapers only reported 30,000 stolen. Wade's eyebrows rose. That's interesting. Where did the extra 20,000 come from, or go to? I need to find that second ledger, Catherine said. The letter said it contained the truth. And we will. Wade's voice was determined. But first, we need to get you safely away from town. You can't go back to Mrs. Porter's now, and the ranch isn't safe either. They'll look for you there next. Where can I go? Wade glanced at the setting sun. I know a place. Do you trust me, Catherine? It was the first time he had used her given name, and something in his voice made her heart beat faster. Yes, she replied simply. I trust you. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. Good, because what I'm about to propose is highly improper but necessary for your safety. By the time full darkness had fallen, they had reached a small cabin tucked into a stand of cottonwoods beside a creek. It was a simple one-room structure, but solidly built and well-maintained. My hunting cabin, Wade explained as he lit a lamp. Few people know it exists, and those who do wouldn't think to look for you here. Catherine glanced around at the sparse furnishings: a bed, a table with 2 chairs, a small stove, and shelves stocked with provisions. It's perfect, but where will you stay? I'll sleep outside, Wade said, already moving to gather blankets. There's a good spot under the trees where I can keep watch. That's unnecessary, Catherine protested. I can't take your bed while you sleep on the ground. Wade's expression softened. Catherine, after what happened today, I'm not leaving you alone and unprotected. The cabin is yours. I'll be comfortable enough. She wanted to argue further but saw the determination in his face. Thank you for everything. You've risked so much for me and you barely know me. I know enough, he replied quietly. Their eyes met in the lamplight, and Catherine felt something shift between them, an acknowledgement of the growing connection that went beyond his role as her protector. Wade cleared his throat and moved toward the door. There's food on the shelves. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out our next steps. After he left, Catherine explored the small cabin, touched by the evidence of Wade's practical nature. Everything was orderly and well thought out. The bed, when she finally lay down upon it, carried the faint scent of him: leather, sage, and something uniquely masculine. Sleep eluded her as her mind replayed the day's events. The confrontation with Judge Ellis and Milbury had confirmed her suspicions about her father's framing, but it had also raised the stakes dangerously. They were clearly willing to fabricate evidence against her too. Catherine tossed and turned, guilt gnawing at her. Wade had now placed himself squarely in opposition to the town's most powerful men, all to protect her. His ranch, his reputation, perhaps even his life were at risk because of her. A sudden noise outside the cabin made her freeze. Footsteps approached, then stopped at the door. Catherine reached for the revolver Wade had given her, holding her breath. "Catherine," Wade's voice came softly through the door. "Are you awake?" she exhaled in relief. "Yes, come in." He entered, carrying a small bundle. "I brought something from my saddlebags, thought you might need it." He unwrapped a woman's nightgown and a simple dress. "They belong to my sister. I keep some of her things." Catherine took the clothes, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I didn't know you had a sister." A shadow crossed his face. She died 8 years ago, typhoid." He gestured to the clothing. "Sarah was about your size. I think these will fit." "I'm sorry about your sister," Catherine said gently. Wade nodded, his expression distant. "She was my only family. After she died, I threw myself into building the ranch." He seemed to shake off the memories. "Anyway, I thought you'd be more comfortable with something clean to wear." "Thank you." Catherine hesitated. "Wade, I've been thinking, maybe I should leave Naco. I never meant to put you in danger." His eyes locked with hers. "Is that what you want, to give up on clearing your father's name?" "No," she admitted. "But I don't want anyone else hurt because of me." "Catherine." Wade stepped closer, his voice low and intense. "Those men have been hurting this town for years. They've twisted the law, intimidated good people, and stolen more than just money. Someone needs to stand against them, and I'm choosing to do that, with or without you." The strength of his conviction stirred something in Catherine. She reached out impulsively, placing her hand on his arm. "With me, then." His gaze dropped to her hand, then back to her face. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities. For a heartbeat, Catherine thought he might pull her into his arms. Instead, Wade stepped back, his expression softening. "Get some sleep. You're safe here tonight." As he turned to leave, Catherine called after him. "Wade. Thank you for being my friend in a town of enemies." He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Rest well, Catherine." Alone again, Catherine changed into the nightgown, its soft cotton a welcome replacement for her travel-worn clothes. As she settled back into bed, she realized that for the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel completely alone. Morning brought a new sense of determination. Catherine awoke to the smell of coffee and found Wade already stoking the small stove, a pot bubbling on top. "Hope I didn't wake you," he said, looking up as she emerged from behind the privacy screen where she'd dressed in Sarah's simple blue dress. "Not at all." She smoothed the unfamiliar fabric. "Thank you for the clothes. They fit well." Wade's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he returned his attention to the coffee pot. "Thought we should discuss our plan over breakfast." They ate a simple meal of beans, bacon, and biscuits that Wade had prepared. Catherine was surprised by his competence in the small kitchen. "Ranch life teaches you to fend for yourself," he explained, noticing her expression. "Even with Mrs. Flores at the main house, I'm often out for days with the cattle." "It's delicious," Catherine assured him. "Now about this plan," Wade leaned back in his chair. "First, we need to establish your new identity. I've been thinking about that. How does Catherine Wilson from Denver sound?" "Wilson? Isn't that the bank bookkeeper's surname?" "Precisely. We'll say you're her cousin come to visit. It gives you an immediate connection to someone respectable in town, and Lorraine Wilson is too proud to deny the relation publicly, even if she's suspicious." Catherine considered this. "Will she cooperate?" "She won't have to. You'll present yourself to Milbury's mine office, not the bank." I've already sent word through a trusted friend that a qualified bookkeeper is arriving from Denver, highly recommended. Won't they be suspicious of the timing? Wade smiled. Milbury's too arrogant to connect a professional woman seeking employment with the Catherine James he's trying to run out of town. Besides, they're desperate for help with their accounts. And you think I can just walk in there and get hired? With your qualifications and my friend's recommendation. Yes, Wade leaned forward, his expression serious. Once inside, you'll need to look for anything connected to that second ledger or the missing money. But Catherine, you must be careful. These men are dangerous. She nodded, understanding the risk. What about you? Won't they suspect you're helping me if I suddenly disappear from the ranch? I'll tell a story about firing you for incompetence. It will reinforce their view of me as difficult and temperamental. He grimaced. Not exactly a stretch in their minds. Where will I stay? I can't go back to Mrs. Porter's. My friend Edwin has a small house on the edge of town. His sister lived there before she married and moved to Tucson. It's been sitting empty. You can stay there as Catherine Wilson, respectable cousin of the bank's bookkeeper. Catherine was impressed by how thoroughly Wade had thought this through. Who is this friend who's helping us? Edwin Prescott, she gasped. The bank clerk, but he works for Milbury. And hates him thoroughly, Wade replied with a grin. Edwin has suspected embezzlement for months but hasn't been able to prove anything. When I approached him confidentially yesterday, he was more than willing to help. Catherine shook her head in wonder. You've managed to create an entire new life for me overnight. Wade's expression grew serious. It's temporary, just until we find the proof you need. Then you can be Catherine James again, with your father's name cleared. She reached across the table and squeezed his hand impulsively. I don't know how to thank you. His fingers closed around hers. You don't need to thank me. Just be careful. If anything happened to you. He trailed off, his grip tightening briefly before he released her hand. Over the next hour, they refined the details of Catherine's new identity. She would present herself as a widow whose husband had died in a mining accident, leaving her in need of employment. Her experience in accounting had brought her to visit her cousin Lorraine, who had mentioned the mine's need for a bookkeeper. It's close enough to the truth to be convincing, Wade said. The best lies always contain elements of truth. When do we put this plan into action? Catherine asked. Tomorrow. Today we need to make you look the part. Wade stood and collected his hat. I'm going into town to get a few things. You stay here, out of sight. I'll be back before dark. After Wade left, Catherine busied herself cleaning the small cabin and reviewing the story they had created. She needed to be word perfect in her responses about her fictitious background. As promised, Wade returned before sunset, his saddlebags full. He produced a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles, a plain bonnet, and some cosmetics. Spectacles? Catherine questioned, trying them on. The lenses were clear glass, offering no magnification but changing her appearance subtly. You'd be surprised how differently people see you with them, Wade explained. And the bonnet will help hide your hair, which is quite distinctive. Catherine touched her chestnut curls self-consciously. Is that good or bad? Beautiful, Wade said quietly, then cleared his throat. But memorable. We want you to blend in. He showed her how to apply the cosmetics to make herself appear slightly older and more careworn, a subtle darkening beneath the eyes, a slight paling of the lips. How do you know about such things? Catherine asked, impressed by his knowledge. Wade's smile was enigmatic. I wasn't always a rancher. Now let's practice your story again. By the time darkness fell, Catherine felt confident in her new identity as Catherine Wilson, widow and bookkeeper. They shared another simple meal, and this time Wade accepted her offer to help with the washing up. Standing side by side in the small space, Catherine was acutely aware of Wade's presence. Their hands brushed as she passed him a plate, and she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove heat. "Tomorrow will be dangerous," Wade said suddenly, his voice low. "If you want to change your mind, I would understand." Catherine turned to face him. "I'm not afraid." "You should be," he replied, his blue eyes intense. "Milbury and Ellis are ruthless. If they discover who you really are, they won't," she assured him. "You've prepared me well." Wade set down the dish towel and turned fully toward her. His hands came up to frame her face, so gently she barely felt their touch. Catherine. Her heart pounded as she looked up at him. In the lamp's golden light, his face was all planes and shadows, his eyes dark with an emotion she was afraid to name. "Yes," she whispered. For a long moment he simply gazed at her, his thumbs tracing feather-light circles on her cheeks. Then, with what seemed like immense effort, he dropped his hands and stepped back. "Dawn comes early," he said, his voice rough. "You should get some rest." Disappointment and relief warred within her. Catherine nodded, retreating behind the privacy screen to change into the nightgown. By the time she emerged, Wade had already left the cabin. She extinguished the lamp and climbed into bed, her thoughts in turmoil. The mission ahead was dangerous enough without the complication of growing feelings for Wade Zimmerman. Yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, his quiet strength, his unwavering support, the glimpses of vulnerability beneath his capable exterior. Catherine fell asleep with Wade's almost touch still tingling on her skin, wondering what tomorrow would bring. The transformation was remarkable. Catherine barely recognized herself in the small mirror Wade held up. With the spectacles perched on her nose, her hair severely pinned beneath the plain bonnet, and the subtle aging effects of the cosmetics, she looked like a different woman, sober, respectable, and utterly forgettable. "Perfect," Wade said, studying her critically. No one who saw Catherine James would connect her with Mrs. Wilson. "I feel strange," Catherine admitted, adjusting the unfamiliar spectacles, "like I'm wearing someone else's skin." "That's exactly what you're doing." Wade handed her a small reticule. "Inside you'll find identification papers Edwin created for you, references from a Denver mining company, and enough money to establish yourself in town." Catherine opened the bag and gasped at the stack of bills. "This is too much. It's necessary to make your story believable. A professional woman with savings would have this much." Wade's expression brooked no argument. "Consider it an investment in justice." They rode separately into town, maintaining a cautious distance. Wade had procured a gentle mare for Catherine, along with appropriate riding attire for a professional woman. The plan was for him to arrive first and be seen publicly at the general store, establishing his presence elsewhere while Catherine made her way to Edwin Prescott's house. The small dwelling on the eastern edge of town was neat and unassuming, set back from the road behind a picket fence. Edwin himself was waiting, a slender young man with intelligent eyes behind round spectacles, not unlike the ones Catherine now wore. "Mrs. Wilson, I presume," he said with a nervous smile as he ushered her inside. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Prescott," Catherine replied, removing her gloves. "Mr. Zimmerman speaks highly of you." Edwin blushed slightly. "Wade has been a good friend. One of the few who believed me when I tried to raise concerns about irregularities at the bank." He gestured to a modest parlor. "Please make yourself comfortable. The house isn't much, but it's clean and private." Catherine looked around at the simple but well-kept furnishings. "It's perfect." "I can't thank you enough for the risk you're taking." "It's no risk if we're careful," Edwin assured her. "My sister left plenty of her belongings here, so it will appear that a female relative has simply come to stay. No one questioned such arrangements. He showed her to a small bedroom where a woman's clothing hung in the wardrobe. These were Margaret's. You're welcome to use anything that fits. It will help maintain your cover. After settling in, they discussed the plan for approaching the mine office. Edwin had already spoken to the foreman, suggesting that his acquaintance from Denver was seeking employment and might be qualified for their bookkeeping position. An interview has been arranged for tomorrow morning, Edwin explained. The mine manager, Mr. Parker, is desperate for help. Their accounts are in disarray, and Millbury is demanding proper records. What exactly am I looking for once I'm inside? Catherine asked. Edwin's expression grew serious. Anything unusual in the financial records, particularly around the time of the bank robbery. Unexplained deposits, discrepancies between reported profits and actual funds, and of course, any mention of a second ledger. They spent the afternoon reviewing what Edwin knew about the mine's operations and Millbury's business practices. Catherine was impressed by the young clerk's detailed knowledge and obvious intelligence. "Why do you stay at the bank if you distrust Millbury so much?" she asked. Edwin sighed. "Someone needs to watch him, and truthfully, employment options are limited in Naco for someone like me." He gestured to his slight frame. "I'm not built for ranch work or mining." As evening approached, Edwin prepared a simple dinner. They were just sitting down to eat when a soft knock came at the back door. Edwin hurried to answer it, returning moments later with Wade. "Any problems?" Wade asked immediately, his eyes finding Catherine. She shook her head. "Everything's going according to plan. Mr. Prescott has been tremendously helpful." "Edwin, please," the young clerk insisted. Wade accepted a plate from Edwin but remained standing, too restless to sit. "I've been making inquiries about the mine. Seems Millbury's been pushing the workers harder than ever, demanding increased production despite safety concerns. That fits with what I've heard at the bank," Edwin added. "He's been moving large sums through various accounts, far more than the mine's reported output would justify." Catherine leaned forward eagerly. "Could that be the stolen money?" "Possibly," Wade said. "But we need proof, not just suspicions." They discussed strategy late into the evening, planning for various contingencies. Finally, Edwin excused himself to his room, leaving Catherine and Wade alone in the small parlor. "You should get some rest before tomorrow's interview," Wade said, moving toward the door. "Where are you staying?" Catherine asked. "I've taken a room at the hotel, publicly so everyone knows I'm in town on ranch business." He hesitated. "Catherine, if at any point you feel you're in danger, abandon the plan. Your safety matters more than any evidence." She stood and moved closer to him. "I'll be careful. But I'm seeing this through, Wade, for my father and for the truth." In the lamp's dim light, his face was solemn. "I know, it's one of the things I—" He paused, then corrected himself. "It's one of the things I admire about you." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Catherine found herself studying the strong line of his jaw, the tiny scar above his right eyebrow, the intensity in his blue eyes. "Wade," she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say. He took her hand, his calloused thumb brushing over her knuckles. "When this is over," he said quietly, "when you're Catherine James again and your father's name is cleared, we should talk." Her heart quickened. "About what?" A small smile touched his lips. "About why a confirmed bachelor like myself is suddenly risking everything for a woman he's known less than a week." Before she could respond, he lifted her hand and pressed a gentle kiss to her palm. "Good night, Catherine. Be brilliant tomorrow." After he left, Catherine stood in the quiet parlor, her hand still tingling from his touch. Despite the dangers ahead, she felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope not just for justice, but for a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Catherine Wilson, widow and professional bookkeeper, was the picture of composed efficiency as she entered the mine office the following morning. Inside, however, Catherine James's heart pounded with anxiety. Everything depended on this performance. The mine manager, Mr. Parker, was a harried-looking man with ink-stained fingers and a perpetual frown. He barely glanced at her references before launching into a description of the chaotic state of the accounts. 3 months of payroll records in complete disarray, he complained. Production figures that don't match shipment logs. Mr. Milbury is demanding accurate reports by the end of the month, and I've been trying to manage it all alongside my regular duties. Catherine adopted an expression of professional interest. It sounds challenging, but not insurmountable. Perhaps if I could see the records, I could assess the scope of work required. Parker seemed relieved by her confidence. He led her to a small office off the main room, where ledgers and loose papers covered every surface. "This is all yours if you want the position," he said. "Salary is $40 a month. Hours are 8 to 5, 6 days a week." "That seems fair," Catherine replied. "When would you like me to start?" Parker looked at the chaos of paperwork. "How about right now?" And just like that, Catherine was employed at Milbury's silver mine. She spent the morning organizing the scattered documents, creating a system that would allow her to review everything systematically while appearing to simply be putting things in order. By midday, she had already noticed several irregularities. The mine's reported silver production seemed to fluctuate wildly, with inexplicable drops followed by sudden increases that didn't align with the number of workers or hours reported. More suspiciously, large cash withdrawals were noted in the weeks following the bank robbery, ostensibly for equipment purchases that never appeared in the inventory. Catherine was carefully copying these discrepancies into a small notebook hidden in her sleeve when the office door opened. She looked up to find herself face to face with Hank Milbury. Her heart stuttered, but she maintained her composure, rising respectfully. "Good afternoon, sir. You must be Mr. Milbury. I'm Catherine Wilson, your new bookkeeper." Milbury studied her with cold, calculating eyes. "Parker mentioned he'd hired someone. You have experience with mining operations." "Yes, sir. I worked for the Colorado Silver Consolidated in Denver for 3 years following my husband's death." Catherine kept her voice steady, grateful for the hours spent rehearsing her background story. "A widow, are you? Working out of necessity, I suppose." Milbury's tone suggested he found the concept distasteful. "The work suits my abilities, sir. Numbers have always come easily to me." Milbury glanced at the newly organized desk. "I expect absolute accuracy and discretion, Mrs. Wilson. The financial details of my operation are not to be discussed outside this office." "Of course, Mr. Milbury. Professional confidentiality is paramount." He seemed satisfied with her response. "I'll need a complete accounting of the last quarter's operations by the end of next week." "Can you manage that?" "I believe so, sir, though the records require significant reorganization." "Do whatever is necessary. Parker has authorized your access to all relevant documents." Milbury moved toward the door, then paused. "You're staying in town?" "Yes, sir, with Edwin Prescott. He's kindly rented me his sister's old room." A flicker of suspicion, crossed Milbury's face. "Prescott? From the bank?" "Yes, sir. His cousin in Denver recommended Naco when I mentioned seeking a change of scenery. A fortunate coincidence that you needed a bookkeeper." Milbury nodded slowly. "Indeed. Fortunate." He left without another word, but Catherine felt a chill of unease. Had she said too much, she returned to her work with renewed urgency, knowing her time might be limited if Milbury began asking questions. By the end of the day, she had documented numerous financial irregularities, but had found nothing explicitly connecting Milbury to the bank robbery or mentioning a second ledger. Edwin was waiting anxiously when she returned to the house that evening. "Well," he asked as soon as she was inside. "How did it go?" Catherine removed her spectacles, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "I was hired immediately. The accounts are a mess, deliberately so, I suspect, and I met Milbury." Edwin's eyes widened. "Was he suspicious?" "I'm not sure. He seemed to accept my story, but he specifically asked about my connection to you." Catherine began to pace. "The financial records show definite irregularities, but nothing conclusive yet. I need more time." A soft knock at the back door interrupted them. Edwin hurried to answer it, returning with Wade, whose face showed immediate relief upon seeing Catherine. "You're safe," he said. "When I heard Milbury had visited the mine office today, I worried he might have recognized you." Catherine described her encounter with the banker. Wade listened intently, his expression darkening at Milbury's questioning about her connection to Edwin. "He'll check your story," Wade warned. "We need to move quickly." "I've found inconsistencies in the mine's accounts," Catherine told him, showing him her notes. "Large cash outlays after the robbery, production figures that don't add up, but nothing about a second ledger yet." Wade studied her notes. "This supports our suspicions but isn't enough to prove anything. What about access to the banker's personal records?" "They wouldn't be at the mine office," Edwin interjected. "Milbury keeps his private accounts at the bank in a locked cabinet in his office." "Could you access them?" Catherine asked. Edwin shook his head regretfully. "He keeps the only key on his person at all times." "I've never seen inside those files." They fell silent, contemplating this obstacle. Finally, Wade spoke. "There's another approach. The letter mentioned looking to the banker's silver mine. What if the second ledger isn't a book at all, but something physically at the mine?" Catherine considered this. "Like what?" "I don't know. A hidden safe, a secret compartment, something only Milbury would know about." "The manager's office has a large safe," Catherine remembered, "but it's used regularly for the payroll and operating funds, not exactly secret." Edwin suddenly straightened. "What about the old tunnel?" "What old tunnel?" Wade asked. "When the mine first opened, they dug in from the north face, but the vein ran out. Milbury ordered a new shaft from the east, which proved more productive. The old tunnel was abandoned but never sealed off entirely." Edwin's eyes were bright with excitement. "About a month after the robbery, Milbury ordered the entrance to the old tunnel boarded up, claiming it was unsafe." Wade and Catherine exchanged a glance. "That's worth investigating," Wade said. "Can you get access to it, Catherine?" "Not openly," she replied. "But I could perhaps stay late one evening after the other workers have gone." "Too dangerous," Wade insisted. "If you're caught, I'll say I was working on the accounts and lost track of time," Catherine countered. "It's plausible." Wade didn't look convinced, but he nodded reluctantly. "Tomorrow night, then. I'll be nearby just in case." The following day crawled by as Catherine continued organizing the mine's chaotic records. She made sure to appear diligent and focused solely on her accounting work, even as she carefully noted the office routines and security arrangements. Parker, pleased with her progress, mentioned casually that he had dinner plans with his wife that evening. "Feel free to lock up when you're finished, Mrs. Wilson. No need to rush." It was exactly the opportunity Catherine needed. After the mine workers departed and the office emptied, she waited an additional half-hour before venturing out with a small lantern. The abandoned tunnel entrance was exactly where Edwin had described at the north end of the mining complex, boarded up with weathered planks and marked with a faded danger sign. Catherine examined the boards carefully. One section appeared to have been removed and replaced more recently than the others, the wood less weathered. With effort, she managed to pull it aside just enough to squeeze through. The tunnel beyond was dark and musty, the air thick with dust and the tang of minerals. Catherine raised her lantern, its light barely penetrating the gloom. The tunnel extended straight for about 50 feet before curving out of sight. Heart pounding, she moved forward cautiously. The packed earth floor showed signs of recent footprints, not the heavy boot marks of miners, but narrower, more deliberate steps. Someone had been here, and not long ago. Catherine followed the footprints around the curve. The tunnel opened into a small chamber that had been crudely enlarged from what was likely a natural cave. Against the far wall stood a desk and chair, incongruous in the underground setting. On the desk sat a heavy ledger. Hands trembling, Catherine opened the book. Unlike the messy accounts in the office, these records were meticulous, detailing sums far larger than the mine's reported production. Parallel columns showed reported versus actual silver yields, with the difference substantial amounts designated for personal reserve. But it was the entries from 6 months ago that made Catherine's breath catch. On the day of the bank robbery, a single line read, "Bank acquisition $50,000. The following pages detailed how the money had been dispersed, some converted to silver ingots stored in this very chamber. Some filtered gradually back into the bank through falsified mining proceeds. This was the evidence that Milbury himself had orchestrated the theft and framed her father. Catherine hastily copied the most damning entries into her notebook, then searched the chamber for the silver ingots mentioned in the ledger. Behind a canvas tarp in the corner, she found a small stack of gleaming bars, each stamped with a serial number that matched the ledger's inventory. She was so focused on documenting her find that she almost missed the sound of faint scraping from the tunnel behind her. Catherine froze, extinguishing her lantern in one quick movement. Darkness engulfed her. Footsteps approached, accompanied by the bobbing light of a lantern. There was nowhere to hide in the small chamber. Catherine pressed herself against the rough wall beside the entrance, praying she might somehow avoid detection. The light grew brighter. A figure stepped into the chamber, not Milbury, as she had feared, but Sheriff Tanner. He moved directly to the desk, seemingly unaware of Catherine's presence in the shadows. The sheriff opened the ledger, flipping to the most recent page. He added an entry, muttering to himself as he wrote. Then he moved to the stack of silver bars, counting them before removing one and placing it in a sack. Catherine hardly dared breathe. She needed to escape before he discovered her, but the only exit was past the sheriff. As she weighed her options, a pebble dislodged from the wall behind her, clattering to the ground. Sheriff Tanner spun around, his hand moving to his gun. "Who's there?" Catherine knew she had no choice. She stepped forward into the light. "Good evening, Sheriff." His eyes widened in recognition, despite her disguise. "You, the James woman." His gun was out now, pointed at her chest. "How did you find this place?" "The same way I found out that you and Milbury robbed the bank and framed my father," Catherine replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Tanner's expression hardened. "You're just as troublesome as your father was. He wouldn't accept our offer either." "What offer?" To take the blame quietly. "We offered him money, you know, enough to start over somewhere else, but he was too righteous." Tanner gestured with the gun. "Now I have to decide what to do with you." Catherine's mind raced. "Others know I'm here," she bluffed. "If I don't return, they'll come looking with evidence we've already gathered." The sheriff laughed harshly. "Nice try, but no one knows about this place except Milbury, Judge Ellis, and me. And soon, no one will know what happened to the nosy daughter of Jasper James." He raised his gun, his intention clear. Catherine closed her eyes, an image of Wade flashing through her mind, his blue eyes, his rare smile, all the things left unsaid between them. A shot exploded in the confined space. Catherine flinched, but felt no pain. She opened her eyes to see Sheriff Tanner crumpling to the ground, blood blooming on his shoulder. Behind him stood Wade, his gun still raised. "Are you hurt?" Wade demanded, crossing to her in 2 long strides. Catherine shook her head, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. "We need to go. Now." Wade guided her toward the tunnel entrance, pausing only to collect the ledger and her notes. "I heard everything. It's the evidence we need." "We can't just leave him," Catherine protested, looking back at the groaning sheriff. "We won't," Wade assured her. "But we need to get this evidence to someone who can help us. The territorial marshal is in town. He's not part of Milbury's circle." They hurried through the tunnel, emerging into the cool night air. Wade had horses waiting, and they rode hard toward town, the precious ledger secure in Wade's saddlebag. Marshal James Burke turned out to be a grizzled veteran of law enforcement with little patience for corrupt officials. After examining the evidence and hearing their story, he immediately organized a group of deputies to arrest Milbury, Judge Ellis, and retrieve the wounded Sheriff Tanner. "This ledger is damning," Burke said, flipping through the pages. "Combined with the sheriff's confession, which I'll get. Don't worry, it's enough to clear your father's name, Miss James." The events that followed seemed to unfold with dizzying speed. Milbury and Judge Ellis were taken into custody, protesting loudly but unable to refute the evidence against them. Sheriff Tanner, facing his own mortality, provided a full confession, revealing how the 3 men had orchestrated the robbery, framed Jasper James, and used their positions of authority to silence any questions. The territorial governor, informed of the scandal, issued an official posthumous pardon for Jasper James, along with a statement acknowledging the miscarriage of justice. For Catherine, the victory was bittersweet. Her father's name was cleared, but he was still gone. As she stood on the porch of Edwin's house 3 days after the arrests, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, she felt both vindicated and adrift. "Penny for your thoughts," came Wade's voice behind her. She turned to find him leaning against the doorframe, his tall figure silhouetted against the lamplight from inside. In the days since their dramatic discovery, they had hardly had a moment alone together, caught up in the legal proceedings and the town's reckoning with its corrupt leadership. "I was thinking about what comes next," Catherine admitted. "My father's name is cleared. His goal is accomplished, but I'm not sure what mine is now." Wade moved to stand beside her at the porch railing. "You could return to St. Louis, resume your teaching." "I could," she agreed, studying his profile. "Is that what you think I should do?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I think," he said finally, "that you should do whatever brings you happiness, Catherine. And if I'm not sure what that is anymore." Wade turned to face her then, his blue eyes intense in the fading light. "Then perhaps you should explore your options before deciding." "What options do you suggest?" A smile touched his lips. "Well, there's a ranch outside Naco that could use a skilled bookkeeper. The owner is particularly impressed by women who face a town of enemies with courage and determination." Catherine's heart quickened. "Is he offering employment or something else?" Wade reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "Both, I think, if she's interested." "She might be," Catherine whispered, "though she'd want to be sure of his intentions." "His intentions?" Wade stepped closer, his hand sliding to cup her cheek. "To love her if she'll let him, to build a life with her, to wake up every morning grateful that she chose to stay." Catherine's breath caught. "That sounds like a proposal, Mr. Zimmerman." "It might be, Miss James, depends on your answer." His thumb traced the curve of her lower lip. "I know it's fast. We've known each other barely 2 weeks, but I've never been more certain of anything." Catherine covered his hand with hers. "When I arrived in Naco, you told me I had one friend worth 100. What you didn't say was that I'd find the other half of my heart as well." Wade's smile was brilliant in the gathering dusk. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," Catherine confirmed, rising on her toes to meet his descending lips. His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, wrapping her arms around his neck, he deepened the kiss, pulling her closer until she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her own. When they finally parted, both breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Catherine James. Have since you stood up to that entire town your first day here." She smiled against his lips. "I love you too, Wade Zimmerman, even if your methods of courtship are rather unorthodox." He laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet evening. "Nothing about us has been orthodox. Why start now?" 2 months later, Catherine stood before the mirror in what was now their bedroom at the Double Z Ranch, adjusting the simple veil that complemented her ivory wedding dress. Outside, the ranch was transformed for the occasion, with lanterns strung between the cottonwoods and tables set for the celebration to follow. A knock at the door announced Mrs. Flores, her dark eyes warm with approval. "You look beautiful, Senora, like an angel." "Thank you for everything," Catherine said, embracing the older woman who had become like family. "I don't know how we would have managed all these preparations without you." Mrs. Flores patted her cheek affectionately. "It brings joy to this old house to have a wedding and to know there will be children someday." She winked. "Mr. Wade, he will be a good father, and you, a wonderful mother." Catherine blushed at the older woman's directness. Though she and Wade had waited for their wedding night, the passion between them had made that patience increasingly difficult. She could scarcely believe that after today, she would fall asleep in his arms as his wife. Another knock heralded Edwin Prescott, who had agreed to walk her down the aisle in her father's stead. The young banker had flourished in recent months, promoted to manager after Milbury's arrest, with a mandate to restore the bank's integrity. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "Wade looks like he might wear a hole in the ground with his pacing." Catherine laughed, taking Edwin's arm. "Then we shouldn't keep him waiting." The ceremony was simple but beautiful, held beneath the spreading branches of the ranch's oldest cottonwood tree. The new town minister officiated, his words nearly drowned out by Catherine's pounding heart as Wade took her hands in his. "I, Wade Zimmerman, take you, Catherine James, as my lawfully wedded wife," he vowed, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When it was her turn, Catherine's voice trembled slightly, but her eyes never left his. "I, Catherine James, take you, Wade Zimmerman, as my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." The kiss that sealed their vows was brief but full of promise, mindful of the audience but undeniably passionate. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. Many of Naco's citizens attended, their initial hostility toward Catherine forgotten in the wake of Milbury's exposure and the town's recovery. The stolen funds had been returned to the bank, businesses were reopening, and a new spirit of community had emerged from the ashes of corruption. As the evening drew to a close, Catherine found herself alone with her husband for the first time, watching the last guests depart from the porch of what was now their home. "Happy, Mrs. Zimmerman?" Wade asked, his arm around her waist. Very, she assured him, leaning into his embrace. Though I still can't quite believe how much has changed in just a few months. Having regrets, he teased. Catherine turned in his arms to face him. None. I came to Naco seeking justice and found love instead, or rather, in addition. She reached up to trace the line of his jaw. I found a man worth fighting for, just as my father was. Wade captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, an echo of that first night in the cabin. And I found a woman worth changing for, worth building a future with. Speaking of the future, Catherine said hesitantly, I've been thinking about the ranch. Oh, Wade's eyebrows rose questioningly. The Double Z has prospered under your management, but I think we could expand further. Perhaps invest in better breeding stock, implement some of the new agricultural methods I've been reading about. A slow smile spread across Wade's face. You've been studying ranching, Catherine nodded. I want to be a true partner to you, Wade. Not just in name, but in all aspects of our life together. The love in his eyes made her breath catch. I married an extraordinary woman, he murmured, drawing her closer. And I married the one man in Naco worth all the others combined, she replied softly, before rising on her toes to kiss him. The kiss deepened, months of restrained desire finally finding expression. When they parted, both breathless, Wade swept her into his arms. I think it's time I showed my wife to our bedroom, he said, his voice husky with promise. Catherine wrapped her arms around his neck. I think your wife would like that very much. As Wade carried her across the threshold of their home, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had arrived in Naco alone, faced with hostility and suspicion, determined to clear her father's name. She had succeeded in that mission, but found something she hadn't been looking for: a love worth fighting for, a partner worth trusting, and a future brighter than any she could have imagined. The town that had once been filled with enemies had become home. And the man who had offered to be her one friend, worth 100, had become her husband, her lover, and her future. It wasn't the justice she had sought, but something infinitely more precious: happiness. 5 years later, Catherine sat on the same porch, watching Wade teach their 4-year-old son William how to ride his pony in the corral. Their 2-year-old daughter Margaret played at her feet, carefully arranging pebbles in patterns that made sense only to her. The Double Z had prospered beyond their expectations, expanding to twice its original size. Catherine's innovative accounting methods and Wade's skillful management had created one of the most successful ranching operations in the territory. They had established a breeding program for stronger, healthier cattle that commanded premium prices at market, and had diversified into horses as well. Naco itself had transformed. After Millberry's downfall, new leadership had emerged, committed to honesty and fair dealing. Edwin Prescott had not only restored the bank's reputation, but had established a loan program to help small businesses and ranchers weather difficult times. The town had grown, attracting families seeking opportunity in the increasingly settled territory. "Mama, look at me," William called proudly as he guided his pony in a small circle, Wade walking alongside. "I see you, sweetheart. You're doing wonderfully," Catherine called back, her heart swelling with pride and love. Wade looked up at her, his smile as devastating as it had been the day they met. The years had added a few lines to his face, a touch of silver at his temples, but had only deepened the bond between them. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Wade joined Catherine on the porch with 2 glasses of whiskey. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments together at day's end, watching the stars emerge over the land they both loved. "I had a letter from Edwin today," Wade said, handing her a glass. The territorial governor is proposing Naco as the county seat when Arizona applies for statehood. That would bring more prosperity to the town, Catherine observed. More businesses, perhaps even a proper school. Wade nodded. Edwin also mentioned that the position of county judge would need to be filled by someone respected and knowledgeable in the law. He gave her a sidelong glance. He suggested I consider it. Catherine nearly choked on her whiskey. You, a judge, why not? Wade grinned at her reaction. I've learned a fair bit of law over the years dealing with water rights and land claims, and I'm respected according to Edwin. You're also opinionated, stubborn, and completely incapable of keeping your thoughts to yourself, Catherine teased. All excellent qualities in a judge, I should think. Wade took her hand, his expression growing serious. The truth is, the ranch practically runs itself these days, with the foreman we've trained. I've been thinking it might be time for a new challenge. Catherine studied him thoughtfully. She had noticed his restlessness lately, his hunger for something beyond the day-to-day operations they had mastered so thoroughly. I think, she said carefully, that you would make an excellent judge, fair, principled, impossible to intimidate or bribe. She squeezed his hand. And I think our children would be proud to see their father serving the community in such a role. Relief washed over Wade's features. I wasn't sure how you'd feel about it. It would mean more time in town, more public scrutiny. Wade Zimmerman, when have I ever shied away from a challenge? Catherine set her glass down and moved to sit in his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. Besides, I rather like the idea of being married to the judge. Very respectable, he laughed, pulling her closer. Respectable, us. The woman who went undercover to expose corruption and the rancher who shot a sheriff, former identities, she murmured against his lips. Now we're pillars of the community with adorable children and a model marriage. Model marriage, huh? His hand slid up her back, tangling in her hair. Perhaps we should practice our model behavior upstairs. Catherine kissed him deeply before pulling back with a mischievous smile. Race you. As they climbed the stairs together, hand in hand, Catherine reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that first confrontation on Naco's dusty Main Street, she alone against a town of enemies. He the unexpected ally offering friendship worth 100 others to this life they had built together, filled with love, purpose, and joy. She had come to Naco seeking justice for her father, but had found so much more. A home, a family, and a love that grew stronger with each passing year. The pain of the past had not disappeared, but it had been transformed into something beautiful, a legacy of courage and integrity that she and Wade would pass on to their children. In the end, it wasn't just Wade who had been the friend worth 100. It was the life they had created together, a partnership of equals, built on trust, respect, and a love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances, but would endure for all their days.